Kootenai County Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing for November 12th, 2020 at 6 p.m. The roll call, we have Commissioner David, Stearns, Hanson, Rose, Malloy, Van Dyke, and Levine are present. I just want to poll the planning commissioners to see if anyone feels like this item that we'll be reviewing tonight presents a conflict of interest at all. Does anybody want to feel that way, or if not, we'll just move forward? Okay. Tonight, we have two items, and what I would like to do is basically, while they're different, they have some commonalities, but they're different. I'd like to ask Director Callahan to do his presentation on both items at the same time. And then when we do the public comments, I would ask the public they can comment on either item. Once we close the public hearing, we will deliberate on each item separately. But at least from a beginning, we'll combine everything. So I would like to call to order, I'd like to open up the public hearing for ORA 20-003, a code amendment regarding minor subdivision regulations, and case number ORA 20-005, which is a code amendment regarding development in floodways. The process for the public hearing will be like we normally do. Director Callahan will give us a briefing on the both items that we'll be covering today, answer any questions that the Planning Commission may have, and then we'll move into the public comment period, where each one of you and everybody on the phone or on Zoom will have an opportunity to address the Planning Commission with your comments on either of the items. When that is done, we'll then just close the public hearing and move into deliberations. So anyone have any questions at all, commissioners? If not, I'm going to ask Director Callahan to begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. I thought it might be useful to start at a high level on the ordinance and drill down to give you the flavor of some things. I'm just scrolling through the ordinance right now to look for something, the easiest level of thing we're dealing with tonight, which I will characterize as housekeeping measures. And it's anywhere that you see the word condominium. In my view, that truly is housekeeping. And here's the example. Because this is the sort of thing we probably should have done in 2016 or in Omnibus 1, 2, or 3, but now is a good time too to just clarify that this is how we deal with condominiums. It's fair to say we've been practicing this way anyway, but this makes it unambiguous so that I don't have to actually make an interpretation if anyone pushes us on it. So that really is all there is for all the places in here you've seen condominium in the ordinance, I mean. Another level, I'm going to move this out of the way so I can find this little button here and go to page 14. This is kind of the next level of importance I would characterize right here, which I'll call it a concession to the building and development industry, where heretofore, it was not possible to issue building permits until you had all the infrastructure in for a new subdivision. This would allow builders, developers to get in front of that and actually start construction once the roads are in good enough so that they can come out of the ground. They're taking a little bit of a risk, but they tell me they're fine with that. The most I can imagine the risk could be is that one of these construction sites catches on fire or needs emergency services, and the staff or the contractors working on the building may be in jeopardy if the road's not quite up to snuff for the ambulance to blow in and out, that sort of thing. But I see that as a very unlikely thing. In all of my adult life, I haven't actually been in a municipality where that happened, where where a house actually caught fire or they needed emergency service while it was under construction. So yes, it's a possibility. I think it's rare. I think the contractors know how to deal with these things. I think normally what I mean by that is the road's going to be good enough that ambulance and fire can still get in there. It's just not, under this proposal, it doesn't have to be finished. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you. So that takes us to the sort of the main event, if you will. And I've highlighted that in the ordinance here, and then we have been over these things in a red line format in our workshops. And I'm just going to that first section that talks about how we'll treat roads and minor subdivisions differently. And this is it. There's two sections like this, one in roads and one in this area. And this is a new section where we make it clear that if this goes forward, minor subdivisions would be treated like they used to be treated before 2016, and actually since the beginning of county regulation up until 2016, so 40 plus years, so that you could only actually do a minor subdivision if you're adjacent to a highway district road, a public road. That's a big change from 2016. We've discussed that in the workshop. If you'd like to go into more details, we can. And in a moment, I'll pull up on the screen the most recent version we've had submitted that makes it clear why we need to do something like this, because at a moment, right now at the moment, our major subdivision regulations are at risk, and I'll show you the example of why. But this is the first place in the ordinance where there's a significant major change. We've been through it, so I won't drill down on the details. We can always come back to this if you'd like. And then there's a second area that we've also gone through in workshop, which is here. And this is under the roads and trails section. And it just more fully describes how under this new proposal, roads will be handled. We've got some diagrams, the same ones we've been through on the workshop. If you want to pull them up, we can look at that. But I think maybe for the audience's sake, and somewhat for the Plan Commission, I'll just drill down on a moment on something that I've sort of glossed over, which is that while the highway districts have actually asked for this, it's before you today, and the county commissioners agreed to let the staff work up this draft and get it in front of you, I haven't really characterized why. And in some ways, I'm putting words in the mouth of the various district engineers. They're all here today or on Zoom. They'll tell me if I'm wrong. But I believe what's really at issue here is what I will call a growth management issue, which is best characterized by way of example. If you remember, I told you in the workshops that before 2016, we were processing roughly 15 to 19 minor subdivisions a year for 40, 50 lots a year. Right now, today, it looks like this year we're going to process 100 minor subdivisions for 250 lots. That's the order of magnitude difference. And why, to me, this is a growth management issue. Our minor subdivision process has opened the barn door so that lots of things are coming through as minor subdivisions, and you'll see an example I have here in just a moment that really should be major subdivisions. I know because I've heard concerns that this will affect property rights, and I understand that concern, but I would like to clarify that in my view, there is no right to subdivide. There never actually has been a right to subdivide. That's always a process that each municipality or local government puts into place based on their policies and their comp plan, and that changes over time. Many communities have an ebb and flow to these things because growth, as you know, ebbs and flows. But every municipality in the continental United States reserves the right to finesse and fine-tune its subdivision regulations in accordance with policy. And so I think this is rightly before you because this, to me, is the classic policy issue. with that, we can always come back to this, but I'd like to switch over and show you this drawing now. This actually just came in yesterday. It's a collection of 14 minor subdivisions for a total of 53 lots. This should be a major subdivision. There are two major differences between what's in front of you and what a major subdivision would do. And I'll start with what to me is the most important first, and that is process. A major subdivision has a much more rigorous review, typically takes 6 months to a year to get through the preliminary stage, and then if a developer is on the very top of their game and does everything perfectly, there's another 4 months to get the final plat. So typically a year and a half, more typically 2 years to get through a major subdivision process because of preliminary final plat, because of the rigorous review, which you would expect to have for 53 new lots. But another significant difference here is that this proposal is going to get processed with the idea that this road you see circling through here is a fire district standard road, because that's what our code currently allows. You will recall that fire district roads are significantly different from highway district roads. They have a different base, a different pavement, a different drainage capacity, a different width. It's fair to say they don't have the longevity of a highway district road. So that's why major subdivisions contemplate that we get highway district roads in this sort of case. And that's, to me, why this example is what the highway district supers have told me is the case of a major subdivision masquerading as a minor subdivision. Thank you. At this time, I can pull up any of the drawings we've discussed in our workshops. I could pull up the red line versions that we've discussed in the workshop if it makes it easier. I can do anything we've looked at before if you'd like. But that really sets the stage, I hope, as much as I intended to do, unless you have questions.
Well, I'd like to ask the planning commissioners to go around and see if anybody has additional questions, and then after that, we can go and talk a little about the other item that we're going to be reviewing tonight.
Floodplain?
Yeah, floodplain. Sure. So let me just go around and see. I'll start with Commissioner Stearns. Do you have any questions for David, for clarifications or comments?
Just one, David. The road, if it's not going to be a highway district standard road, it can still be a private road for the 4 split. What does that do as far as somebody who's already have one of these in place, like you've given us an example?
Anything that's in place gets to keep what it has. This is not retroactive in any way. Is that your question, Barry?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Anything else, Barry?
Just one more, and it's still up to the highway district whether they accept it as a public or private road based on their criteria.
Yes, the highway districts, through a major subdivision, accept their, or not, roads, but the starting point is it has to meet their standard. They won't, to my knowledge, they won't accept any road that doesn't meet their minimum standards.
So it can maintain as a private road?
Are you asking me, Barry, can a major subdivision be a minor, be a private road?
No, I guess I'm asking if somebody brings it up to highway district standards, they can still maintain it as a private road and not turn it over.
Oh, yes, yeah, that's exactly right. Private roads are private roads, and they can be maintained by the entities that own them.
Okay, Commissioner David?
I don't have any.
Okay. Commissioner Rose?
I'm not sure if this is the time
to ask this or bring this up, or if it's, it'd be better during deliberation. But regarding allowing the developers to not have the infrastructure incomplete before they start building. As we were talking about, my own road's a good example. It was a really nice, it was a fire district road, but it was nice road. And by the time they got finished completing the other 3 houses on that road, I was the first one on there of the 4. That road was destroyed. It was pitted and destroyed. So, I guess I'm wondering if we were to allow them to not complete the road to standard, all the construction traffic and whatnot came in, it might be better, because then, they could grade it down and fix it, after all the construction traffic is done. My other concern.
Can I unwind you just a moment?
Sure.
I think it would be helpful if you understand that this has to do with major subdivisions. So, in major subdivisions, we always get a completed road at the end of the process.
Okay.
And so what you just described can't happen.
Okay.
And,
Well, I thought
and
you-
this provision doesn't apply to minor subdivisions, so it's not an issue.
Right, but so then, can you give me an example of what you, a visual or an example of what you mean when you say the road doesn't need to be completed? Does it just need to be?
On that 53 lots I just had on the screen,
Right,
pick a lot anywhere in there.
okay, so,
And the builder wants to start the house now, before the road's accepted by, in this case, let's say it was a regular subdivision, major subdivision, it was going to be accepted by the highway district. With me so far?
yes,
Then in that case, the builder could, if this goes through, the builder could pull a permit now before the road's complete, but it's presumably complete enough that people can get through there if there's an emergency. But they don't have to complete the road until the usual end of the subdivision process, and they get to build their home all that time, or multiple homes. And so the end result is it gives them more flexibility. They can be out there building and actually, I'll be so bold as to say, turning a profit, because that's part of what this is about, is it keeps the sequential process of things going forward. And we're not at risk, because we're going to get our road at the end of the process, and the home buyer's not at risk, because they haven't moved in yet. There's no CO. Does that help?
yes, so the condition or the quality of the road then could just be dirt, ungraded, just as long as it could be traveled on
Well,
during the construction
More
process?
typically, it's
until
already
the-
got a overlot grading and road base, and because builders aren't stupid, they're not gonna get their construction vehicles out there until they know they can get through there. And so more typically, it's gonna have a pretty good road base. It's just not gonna be finalized and accepted by the highway district
Okay,
necessarily. It doesn't prevent a developer or builder from doing it, but this would allow more leeway, if you will.
okay, so then my next concern or question would be, and we've seen this happen, I know you've seen it happen, is, a development is started, something, the economy crashes, or something goes wrong, and the developer goes into bankruptcy and can't complete the subdivision, then what? How do we make sure the
All of our major
road?
subdivisions are bonded,
Okay. That's what I was gonna ask to see if, okay,
yes.
okay, thank you.
And actually, we get same kind of thing up in minor subdivisions, so that we don't get the cart before the horse.
Okay,
They either normally build the road before we record the plat, or we get a bond.
okay, that was what I was gonna ask, if there's bond, okay.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Malloy?
John.
Yes, sir. Sorry, I was muted. I do have numerous comments, I would say, but I would also say they probably are better left for deliberations.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Commissioner Van Dyke?
He's muted.
Bing, you're muted.
if I can unmute him from this side.
Can you?
I can't do it, but I'm asking him. There he is. Ask him again, David.
Bing, can you unmute yourself?
All right, does he have anything to say?
You have anything to say?
All right, am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, David, would you put up on the screen that example you showed us during our last workshop with the major subdivision masquerading as multiple minor ones?
I believe I can. Bear with me a moment. I cleaned out
I
the,
think that would be useful in helping other people understand why we're doing this.
you're talking about the one that I showed during the workshops.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'm embarrassed to say that I deleted that one because I thought this one told the same story better.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much the same type of thing. It may be a different number of,
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the same one, but the idea of subverting our intentions by using a multiple number of alternate or skipped minor subdivisions to subvert or postpone the requirement of a major subdivision.
Well, this would be it in spades. I assume you're seeing what's on the screen. Mr. Bingham,
Bing,
I don't
did you-
see it yet.
do you see it? Does everybody
says I'm
see it?
screen sharing. I hope.
I see the file structure. I don't see a.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Ditto.
Yeah, I know, we've had that problem in
well,
the past.
let me stop sharing and try again. Here it is, share screen. There, now does it work? Now are you seeing it?
Oh, yeah, is anybody seeing it?
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay.
So just to be clear for those that aren't familiar with these things, each place where it's written MIN 20, that's a minor subdivision. In each case, 4 lots, except down here, there's 3 lots, and down here, there's 2 lots. So when you do the math, that's how I come up with 53 lots. Normally, this would be one major subdivision. Here we've got 14 minor subdivisions. Where it'll get weird, among the weirdnesses, is the highway district gets to say how many points of access, I guess, each one of these gets to their point, their primary road, I mean. I don't know how that's going to play out in this case because I haven't seen one like this come before them before. There's also the weirdness of each of these 4 lots has a common drive going into it. That again just meets fire district standards. And in this case, they're little cul-de-sacs. I can't actually tell what's going on the rest of them.
Anything else, Bing? Okay.
So what we have here, as a result of this, we have something that would not pass the requirements of a major subdivision
That's correct.
because it was pulled off as a whole bunch of minor subdivisions in series.
Yes, and it also misses the process, as I described earlier.
And as I understand it, this is something that all planning commissions try to avoid.
Well, I don't know that I can go so far as to say that, but
All
I
right,
can say
most-
in my experience, this is the sort of thing should be handled as a major subdivision.
Okay. And I think that's what I wanted to put into the record.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. And Commissioner Hanson?
Just one question with this on the screen. If you took just one of those minor subdivisions and set it in got rid of the rest, so you have 4 parcels, let's say MIN 200071. Under the current regulations, that would be fire district standard or fire district code standard. And the road from it to public road could also be fire district standard, am I correct?
Yes, with the assumption that you're talking about one of these that I have the cursor on,
Yeah.
and the presumption is that the the fire district road would serve all 4 lots and have one access onto whatever's I actually don't know, but I'm assuming that maybe this is an arterial that's, or at least a collector that's a highway district road, but I'm not sure, frankly.
Well, here's my question. If that is a public road on the right-hand side of the screen, the highway district standards, but interior coming from one of these, four lots or 4 parcels, and inside of it, it was fire district standards. But if it weren't touching that public road, but had to extend out to the public road, let's say over to the right where it says Millhorn, and that was the public road, in other words, crossing other land, could all of the roads within that minor subdivision of 4 parcels, it looks like, and the road connecting to the public road, all be fire district standards under the current regulations?
I'm not sure I know what your question is. I'm going to see if I can diagram it. Are you saying if you had this MIN 200082 as one and then another on the other side of the road?
Well, you have to connect that M200082 to a public road at some point.
Right.
So the road beyond MIN 200082 would the connector road to that public highway, which is highway district standard. Under the current regulations, could that be fire district standard?
I'm sorry, Wes, I'm still not getting it. Let me tell you what I know, and then maybe this will answer your question. If we're still on this 82, if this, let's just make up some facts for a moment. Suppose this is not a highway district road, it's a private road. Then the roads leading into this MIN and this can meet fire district standards until it gets to the public highway district road.
That answers it.
Okay.
Okay, anything else, Wes? That was it?
That's it.
Okay. David, will you just move on to the other topic real fast?
the floodplain regs?
Yeah, the flood, it's pretty
Sure,
pretty clean, but I want to make sure everybody, the members of the public also know what that issue is.
of course. Okay, now I have to go back through the sharing process. That should do it. What I've just pulled up is the actual ordinance. And the easy way to think of this is it's another housekeeping measure where we made a mistake when we adopted the last floodplain regs. We said you have to do 2 things. What you see under 1, a no-rise certificate, and you also have to do a conditional letter of map revision and ultimately a letter of map revision. That's 2. What the actual model says is 1 or the other. That's what we should have done. So this is truly just taking us back to what we should have done when we last had this in front of you. The reason I got involved in this one is we have an actual owner who has hired an engineer to go through this process. And we told them, well, at the moment, you have to actually do these 2 things. This particular engineer made it really clear to me that that seems silly, especially given that's not what the federal regulations say.
Right.
So that's why we're fixing this.
Just to clean up.
Yes, sir.
Anybody have any questions on this? Okay, I'd like to start, David, the public testimony phase. And for the members of the public, either here or on the phone or on Zoom, I'd ask that when you start, please let us know your name and your address for the public record. The amount of time is about 5 minutes of speaking, up to 5 minutes. And we request that your comments are going to be addressing the code's decisions we're making tonight. Any other comments you may have about the land use code could be done at a later date, sending an email to either David's organization or the Planning Commission. And I think there are cards, David, and so you usually facilitate this, so I'll let you
Yes, sir.
handle the start of this.
I'm going to just call them out as they were given to me, and some people have marked that they don't want to speak, but in case they've changed their mind, I'm going to call out their name anyway. So Chad Johnson does not wish to speak. Chad, have you changed your mind? No. Thank you. Connie Kruger does wish to speak. Connie, come on up.
Can we turn down a little bit?
If,
What was that?
I don't know. If you're Zoom, on a Zoom or a phone or here, can you mute yourself unless you're speaking? Thank you.
Yes, that's fine.
I feel good about that being the first one up here. My name is Connie Kruger, and my address is 1859 North Lakewood Drive, Suite 102, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, 83854. And I am here tonight to speak on behalf of the subdivision regulations and more specifically the road infrastructure requirements as they relate to that. I'm glad that I'm here tonight. This helps me to understand a little bit more about what is driving the desire for these amendments. You know, when you look at crafting code, you're always looking at what is the problem that you're trying to solve. And in the work that I do, I actually work with a local surveying firm and handle a lot of their subdivision activity. And then I also...
Speak directly into the...
Oh, I'm sorry. And then I also have my own consulting firm where I work with developers doing subdivision. And so as part of that, we have quite a number of these subdivision applications that come across. And the vast majority of these are people who are older. They are moving into their retirement years. They may want to create one lot, two lots. Not really typical of the example that we saw of, you know, the egregious example that David provided. We also see young couples that, you know, maybe are, you know, going in with a brother or sister and they're dividing the land up. So again, very, you know, single minor subdivisions that are being divided into one, well, not one, but divided with one additional lot, two additional lots, you know, kind of that volume. In fact, we quite often get comments from people walking by, you know, of just like, hey, you know, the variety of people that they see within the office, and all wonderful people. And so today, I'm here to be able to speak for those future clients, the future people that will want to subdivide their property. And as we look at this new code amendment, and we've looked back over the minor subdivisions that we've done in the last 2 years, we believe that this would have prohibited about 50% of those minor subdivisions from going forward. So 50% of those mom, pa's, brothers and sisters that wouldn't be able to move forward with subdividing their land. The county has recently put other code in place related to roads in minor subdivisions, and it's a little awkward, a little odd to implement. There's a disconnect between the county in their process and the highway districts in their process and implementation of that. And it has been a challenge, and it's led to a lot of unpredictability. And so, you know, we're always glad to see, you know, working on code and refining code. But at this point, to be rolling code back to something that was in effect from in 2016, it was obviously modified because there was a need or a desire to modify it, doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And so tonight, the thing that I heard that was very interesting to me is that this is a growth management tool that is being used. A little bit about my history. I actually have spent about 25 years in local government, working in positions like David's worked in for cities and for counties. And I've worked in Washington State, which is a growth management state. And there are lots of different tools that you can use for growth management. And I have outlined a couple of them for you that I'll go over with you here very quickly. But what I was hoping to hear today is the fire districts are having problems getting into these minor subdivisions. There are these really valid issues that we need to address, you know, for the public good. And what I've heard instead is that we need to manage growth. And well, that we need to manage growth and that we're concerned about the permit volume and its impact to our staff. And I would just like to note that I work with cities, I work with counties in this area. everyone has an increase in the volume of their permitting. And as you know, with growth, growth goes into a region and it's distributed between urban and rural regions, so everybody feels the impact of that. So a couple of tools just to think about as you're moving forward in your contemplated amendments to the code. One really great tool is looking at the level of service on the roads that these subdivisions access and finding out if you actually have a level of service failure with the volume of traffic that you're putting on the road. And that can be put into your code where you actually have a threshold and where an application can be denied for not meeting level of service. Another provision that you could put into your code is addressing fire department and utility service provider needs. And this could be put into your code by sitting down and working with them to better understand what those needs are and to address them. But again, today I didn't hear that there was a problem with that, and maybe we'll hear more about that. Another tool would be reserving adequate right-of-ways in areas where future public roads may be needed. And this also allows you to address some of the issues that David brought up, the idea of regulatory takings. And if you take a look at this chart that you provided, and you start to look at the areas now where you're going to be requiring highway district standard roads, what you're going to see is that if you're a little minor subdivision at the very end of a private road, and all of a sudden you're required to bring that whole road up to code to meet a highway district standard, you potentially are running a risk of regulatory takings. And so there are tools to be able to address that by, requiring people to reserve right-of-way, do certain types of site planning that aren't as egregious as requiring them to bring an entire road up to code. And I think it's helpful also in certain codes to have that regulatory takings analysis requirement up front and center in the code, especially when you have a different agency that you're sending people out to find out that information from on what the road requirements will be. There are also tools that allow for family and land division, and I did find a recent example in the Spokane County subdivision code, where they allow for a division of land which is no less than 5 acres in size for the purpose of transferring this to a spouse, son, daughter, mother, brother, and so on. And they have some timing provisions within that that only allow you to do it if you've owned the land within the previous 5 years and you don't transfer it again within the subsequent 5 years. So those are just ideas. Those are different ways that you can go about addressing growth, and there are many, many more. But these were just ones that I pulled together tonight because I'd kind of heard that. We had a couple of our property owners who've come in, and I said, well, what have you been, hearing at the county? And they just said, the county just doesn't seem to really want the growth. And, I think there definitely is, an impact to the staff in processing the applications as we've talked about. But I think a growth management mandate is a much bigger mandate. I think that comes about through a bigger public process. I haven't had a chance to look at your comprehensive plan to see if there's specific goals and policies that say to manage growth by rolling your subdivision regulations back to 2016. I would imagine it actually doesn't say that because, again, managing growth is kind of a multi-prong project that an agency or entity takes on. So those are some ideas that I would love to see you explore as you move this further. Tonight, I'm obviously speaking out in opposition to the language that is proposed. And I would request that you take the time to really think about this. And, if it didn't work in 2016, why roll it back? And, again, look at tools that address some of these, larger issues. I agree when I look at that. Exempt segregations and the subsequent minor subdivisions, is that good planning? Is that what we really want? Again, I think those are few and far between, but are we taking that and basically using it as an example to move forward a growth management mandate? So lots of different ways to approach this. I am also very, happy to play a role in any code that you do craft. I am a certified planner, and I have obligations to my clients, but I also have obligations to the public good as part of that. So I would just encourage you to do that, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. And I hope that you heard me because I have a very quiet voice, so thank you.
Next up is Eric Shanley, who does wish to speak.
Very much. Eric Shanley, 11341 North Ramsey Road, Hayden, Idaho, 83835. It's Shanley. And I would like to share an example. David, can you put this up on the screen?
I can't, but we can pass it out. If we take a 5-minute break, I can reload it, but for later.
And I would like to hand that example out because I think it is going to be different when I explain the concern that we have. Yes, thank you. Looks like the commission may have a copy of that in their packet. I don't know if those online have that also. Okay.
This was one we discussed in workshop, and my staff's loading it into the electronic file, so later on tonight I can pull it up for everyone. Yes. Right.
Okay. Should I go ahead, sir? Okay, thank you. So I've been asked by my commissioners of the Lakes Highway District to come and talk to the commission about concerns that they have with respect to the current subdivision ordinance and also what we feel the amendment's falling short in addressing, and that's related to this issue of subdivision exemptions and minor subdivisions that actually front a current public road. The example that I've provided to you is two large parcels in northern Kootenai County up by Highway 54 that have created 20 free splits, and those have been since further subdivided within the last year and a half into 80 parcels, excuse me. So just the free splits themselves have certainly created a major subdivision, what would classify as a major subdivision, and then those were further refined into minor subdivision of 4 lots. One of the concerns that we have of that is with regard to the vetting of the actual transportation impacts on our roadways and intersections. We do know in practice, as traffic increases, as intersections and as drive approaches increase, the safety goes down and we create conflicts for drivers on the road. That creates a safety issue, a capacity issue, and a speed issue on our rural roadways, which you may know that on our rural roadways the speeds are much higher than in our cities, so the crash severity is much more significant. And so by masquerading these free splits and minor subdivisions, creating major subdivisions, we're calling it creeping incrementalism, and with concern ultimately with the public that are on the roads. And so we're not asking the commission to consider stopping that of what large acreage property owners can do with their current 20-acre splits, but we're asking to put a mechanism of some sort of control on that, similar to what we used to have prior to the 2016 amendment that limited 4 of those splits, similar to a minor subdivision, and then have a cool-off period that would allow a cool-off period unless the owner of that large acreage parcel that's splitting off all these parcels, theoretically for their families, they went through a major subdivision process which would allow the transportation authorities and the public to vet those transportation impacts and possibly mitigate. Primarily on large subdivisions, we like to see internal road access to major subdivisions with approaches at the quarter-mile or half-mile or mile locations. So that way we can have a known location for traffic to access the roadway and possibly have turn lanes if necessary, if that traffic warrants it. I've proposed, I've provided some documentation to Director Callahan. I don't know if he shared that with you, but again, we didn't want to bring a problem. We wanted to bring a problem and potentially a solution from our perspective. And that solution would be to continue to allow property owners to split their property in a way that they would create a reasonable number of lots that wouldn't constitute development into a major subdivision process. And then again, having that cool-off period that would potentially allow development to cool or go through a major subdivision process, so the appropriate transportation mitigation could be considered by the public. Maybe a lot at you quickly, but if you have any questions for me, I'm welcome to do that. Or
Mr. Chairman, it's my fault. I didn't actually roll in Eric's suggestion in any way that we could discuss it. Eric, would you be willing to just conceptualize what you meant when the email you sent to me?
Sure. I think maybe again, we had proposed a solution that would continue to allow property owners to operate through the exemption process of subdivision exemption process, which would allow them to chunk off their 20 acres for their kids, as an example. And we believe that's the original intent of what that subdivision exemption was for. To allow that up to a point where it would limit to a certain number of lots, we'd suggested 4, because that fit into the category of a minor subdivision. And then anything beyond that would either fit into that cool-off period or a major subdivision process. We feel that type of solution would prevent what we're seeing, where developers, and they're not elderly, but they're developers that are developing property that are splitting off 20-acre parcels. They're putting them adjoining a public road. Like in the example that I've shown you, all the way around, they've created a hat essentially around a 1 mile square section. And then once those 20-acre splits are done, they're immediately turning around and applying for a minor subdivision, creating 4 lots out of each one of those free splits. So circumventing the major subdivision process.
So I have a question. So when you refer to a cool-off period, are you kind of talking about like a moratorium?
No, as I understand from our attorney, prior to 2016, I believe, the county and maybe Mr. Braden or Callahan could speak to this, but I believe there was a cool-off period of a period of a certain number of years between a number of splits that exceeded a certain number.
Pat?
That number is 5 years, and that part of it is still in effect, but what it doesn't prevent right now is somebody doing a minor subdivision adjacent to an existing minor subdivision or kitty corner from it, or just in some sort of common pattern like we're talking about.
Yeah, it wouldn't, because each one of those could be owned by different people, and each one could.
Right, that's
yeah.
why we didn't try to segregate
Yeah.
by ownership in this proposal.
Yeah,
It's too easy to manipulate.
yeah.
And my proposal would include allowing that certain number of free splits essentially from the parent parcel, all under the original same ownership, in the case that I'm showing to the commission.
This happens to be right near my house.
Everything's near your house.
I know, I'm just realizing that.
So you said the same ownership, so they could split the property as long as those 4, let's say 4, divided by 4. Each one of those would be still owned by the family, is that what you're saying? Or could they sell those to individuals?
Mr. Chairman, I think our proposal just tries to separate out it doesn't try to get into the ownership. It's more of an issue of looking at the parent parcel. This one here happens to be owned by a single owner that has split off multiple 20 acres, which is allowed provided the remnant is not less than 20.
Right.
So they're allowed to continue to create minor subdivisions, and under the proposed amendment, those minor subdivisions are going to continue to be allowed if they front a public road, which in each case here, these 20 that were split off, they all front a public road. So you're creating an 80 lot subdivision through that exemption and minor subdivision process.
David, this, I believe, on each side here of Remington, this is about this whole square is about a 500 acre piece, and then this one over here is 600?
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just for the audience sake, we were able to scan and put the graphic on the screen so Zoom people, participants can see what Mr. Shanley
Thank you.
was discussing from, the graphic he worked from. And thank you, Eric, for explaining.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, John?
I've got a couple of questions. First, Mr. Shanley, did I understand it that you are a commissioner with Lakes Highway District?
No, sir, I'm not. I'm the director of highways.
Okay,
I've been asked by my commission to come here.
say that again, please.
I've been asked by my commission to come and speak with the P&Z Commission regarding my comments that I've made.
Okay, no, I understand. So, but I'm still trying to understand what is the main goal here? I mean, the reason we're here, we're mandated to be here is to consider the safety and health, right? And so you address that to some degree, but is it the number of intersections you're talking about, or what is the impact that concerns you most?
Yes, we know there's a direct correlation with the increased number of intersections on a roadway that directly impacts safety on the road. And there's lots of data out of there. A reference that I brought with me tonight is the Highway Safety Manual that's referred to the HSM, and it's provided by AASHTO, and it's guidance that talks directly about mitigating accidents and crashes on public roads, and that's to reduce the number of driveways is one of the items that's being that is addressed for traffic safety on our local roads. And so by
Under the highway district, oh, sorry.
I guess I wanted to offer that our point of the major subdivision process in the case that's on the screen would address potentially the application of internal roadways and single road approaches at appropriate space locations that turn lanes could be implemented for safety versus a driveway every 300 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Next up is Michael Lenz, who does not wish to speak. Michael, have you changed your mind?
Yeah, I'll
Thank you. Go right ahead.
My name's Michael Lenz, 3310 West Robeson, Hayden, Idaho, 83835. I'm the Director of Highways representing the Post Falls Highway District. I don't want to take up a lot of time this evening. Basically, at the Post Falls Highway District, we have the same concerns that Lakes and Eric Shanley are running into. It's becoming more of an access management issue, like Eric stated. The fact that they're bypassing the major subdivision process, in which at that point, you know, we could do some traffic impact studies and things of that nature to possibly put in turn bays or make the area safer. By doing these 20-acre free splits and allowing minor after minor, like Eric said, you could create driveways every 300 feet, which creates an unsafe situation. So, like I said, I don't want to take up a bunch of your time. I think Eric discussed most of our concerns that the highway districts, Kootenai County, kind of all share. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin Howard.
My name's Kevin Howard. I'm the district supervisor for Worley Highway District. probably the last dinosaur, no longer any supervisors except for me. They're all directors now. If I could ask Mr. Callahan to put Exhibit 1000 back on the screen, please, I'd appreciate it. My largest concern for Worley Highway District, we haven't had the growth that Post Falls and Lakes has had, but now this happens to be a stone's throw from my office. And yes, and what I would like to say is that with the topography and the roads in our district, it would be appreciated that the Highway District have an opportunity to discuss any split, even the 20-acre splits, with the property owner. And this is a prime example here. Well, first of all, I'll go back. The reason for any split in a discussion is that a split can be made, or a parcel of land can be made adjacent to a road and not have access that is actually safe access or even meet our standards. And the problem that the Highway District faces then is that anybody with parcel of land adjacent to public right-of-way has the right to that right-of-way. So if you have topography that creates a sight distance problem, you've taken a 45-mile-an-hour road and you have to reduce it to 15 miles an hour to protect the public from a poor intersection or poor driveway. So again, it's about public safety and planning. Now, if we could go back to the exhibit on the screen there that David is juggling for me. The public road on the right-hand side of that was alluded to, that is a farm-to-market clay base road with gravel on it. So if you picture your front yard with about 2 inches of gravel and now put 460 cars on that, that's going to produce. Because well, Kootenai County had paid for a study years ago to see how many vehicles per household or per parcel would be produced, and that was 9 cars a day. That was a long time ago, 9 cars a day. So you're looking at roughly 460 cars on a road that's currently running about 30 to 40 cars a day. So without the major subdivision process, I have no way to mitigate that. Through the process with the major subdivision, they would be required to bring the frontage road up to Highway District standards. So that gravelled road on the right, the developer, and you can see this on Lofts Bay Road with Black Rock and I'll think of the other one in a minute. Anyway, we required them, because of the mass of vehicles that was going to travel on that road, to take that clay-based road and build it to Highway District standards so it would withstand the traffic load. You see the internal roads you were talking about, and the discussion about whether or not that's built to fire standards or highway standards. The Highway Districts reserve the right to refuse any request to take over a road right-of-way. But for those folks, if they want to plan for the future, the Highway District, having an opportunity to visit with them, could at least ask them to produce a Highway District right-of-way width that would provide for a road. If I had the opportunity to discuss this with this gentleman, I would let him know that we need a 60-foot road width minimum. Then, if they had a bicycle path in there and they come to the Highway District, we say, you have enough width, build it right. And then we walk away until they build it right. But the biggest concern is, and discussion was earlier about a minor subdivision at the end of an existing private road, and now all of a sudden they have to produce a Highway District standard road. Their biggest issue is buying enough right-of-way to make that Highway District standard road. They have a 20-foot, most often a 20-foot wide easement going through multiple parcels, and it's impossible for them, even if they were required, willing, and had the money to do it, it's impossible unless they buy land from everybody else. So to plan ahead, if this had a 60-foot wide easement, then a Highway District road could be built. All of these things can be discussed if the Highway District has an opportunity to visit with property owners with any parcel split. So I support Eric Shanley and his endeavor. I do know that he has challenges that fortunately I haven't had go through. But I will tell you, this is one of 3 that hit me in a week and a half. That's between 600 and 1,000 acres right next to us, that this is gonna happen in just a couple of years. Another consideration at the south end of the county and on our side of the lake, on the west side of the lake, is it's not over an aquifer. You can put those houses in there, even the 20-acre parcels, and one of those parcels could be sitting in a spot where they can't find water, period. They can't even drill their own well. So I would just say that that's a consideration as well. I can show you several subdivisions on the south end of the district that have dried up because, well, there's a 60-lot subdivision on Ditmore Road, Township 47 North, Range 4 West, approximately Section 26, that was done in the 70s, and there's only 5 houses on 60-some lots because there's no water. So that's a consideration as well. That's a side note. I just say that the highway districts need an opportunity to have a discussion with property owners with any split.
Thank you.
That's what, thank you.
Last person in person is Tiffany Espy, who said she does not wish to speak. Tiffany, have you changed your mind? Thank you.
Right.
We have your
Yeah.
written comments, and the Plan Commission has gone over them. That takes us to the Zoom portion. Let me go to that list and see who might want to. I'll just go down the list with no particular order. Jeff Steenerson, did you wish to speak?
I'd just like to reiterate what Connie said in terms of people that are coming in, maybe with families, generational situations where minor subdivisions would be beneficial for them. So I'd also like to know that if this thing does pass, what would be the implementation time period of when this would go into effect? I know you're voting on this on December 10th. What's the time frame beyond September 10th?
Mr. Chairman, do you want us to answer that?
Yeah, if you'd
Pat
like.
can answer the details.
The procedure here is the Planning Commission, after they take public testimony, will deliberate and potentially make a recommendation as to whether or not to adopt this ordinance or any part thereof. Then that will go to the Board of County Commissioners for their own public hearing. And at that time, the county commissioners will deliberate on it and decide whether to adopt any part of the proposed ordinance. If they do adopt an ordinance at that time, it normally takes we usually give it about another week for execution of the actual ordinance once it's final. And then it's normally the following week, typically on a Tuesday, when notice that adoption's printed in the Coeur d'Alene Press, and at that point it becomes effective. And Sandy Gilbertson is saying it was December 22nd, in case he didn't hear her. Of course, any subdivision application that has been accepted and is complete with the Community Development Department prior to that date will be vested under the current regulations. And then any subdivisions that, applications that are received on or after that date will have to abide by the new regulations.
Yeah, that was another question I had. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, John?
for my records, what's the name of the current speaker there in public?
Jeff Steenerson, Steenerson.
And he was on Zoom.
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you.
The next in line here is Josh. That's the only name I have. Josh, did you wish to speak?
This is Josh Sir, David, thank you. Josh Sir, 11168 North Bartlett, Hayden, Idaho, 83835. And for those of you I haven't met, I'm the 2020 president of the Association of Realtors. I'm also the legislative committee chair and state political coordinator for Idaho Realtors. And I appreciate the work everyone's doing, especially appreciate David taking the time to meet with us and kind of simplify this and explain it. It always helps. We're speaking opposed more specifically to the section 3. I think we all empathize and understand what the highway districts are dealing with and what Mr. Shanley alluded to with the creeping incrementalism. I don't think that was ever the intent of the minor subdivision. I think, but the way I read section 3, where you have to abut a public road to even apply for a minor, I think it's a bridge too far that has the practical application of eliminating. I think when Connie spoke, she mentioned 50%. I think it's possible that it may even be more than that. So I think our goal would be to try to see some alternative language that didn't completely throw out the baby with the bathwater in the sense of some of these smaller, true minor subdivisions, which are 10 acres being split into 2 5s, or some of the family parcels, things like that that maybe are that aren't right on a public road or on a private road somewhere. I don't think that's the intent of the highway districts, is to shut the door completely on those, but that's my concern with the way this verbiage is. So I won't take up any more of your time. That's where we stand on that, and happy to help in any way possible to, meet and possibly go over some additional language if that's what's needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. I don't have a name with this phone number. It might be Commissioner Malloy. Are you at 8323, John?
Sorry, I'm muted, but that's probably me, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I do have comments, but I'm waiting patiently.
I understand. We'll come back. Alan Dugan, did you wish to speak?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Allie Taylor?
No, thank you, David.
Thank you. Ben Weymouth?
Thanks, David. I would like to speak for the record. Ben Weymouth, I am Director of Highways for East Side Highway District. Out of respect for everybody's time, I'll shorten what I have to say considerably just by saying I support what all the other Highway District Directors said tonight as well. Maybe to add a little bit of clarity to our position on this, it doesn't, our roads don't care if it's 1 lot or 100 lots, it's all development. I mean, they do, and it all has different impacts. And quite frankly, I think the Highway District is doing a pretty good job of striking, the county staff is doing a pretty good job here of striking a balance between development concerns and, I'll say public agency concerns, because it's bigger than just the highway districts, and really it's the public as a whole. It's the issue that's facing us all. If development isn't paying for these improvements that are needed now or in the immediate future, then who is? The default comes back to the public as a whole. So somewhere in there you have to strike a balance, and we really do appreciate county staff and commissioners here and at the board level all working to try and find some sort of resolution to this and see where it can land in the middle. I'll give you an example. I had a call today on a piece of property, and I knew it. I'd worked on one adjacent to it not so long ago, and the guy talking and asking, is it going to be possible to get an approach here? And I opened up and looked at it, and I about fell out of my chair because a lot split had happened. And essentially, they have a cliff to go through to get to their property now. And there was no, I don't know what to call it, there was a measure in place for that to be addressed and considered during development or during the lot split process. And now we have a landowner sitting there with a piece of property that the cost of getting a driveway in is far greater than the cost of the piece of land. So when, whether it's one lot or 4 lots, the public input isn't there, you're gonna end up in situations that hurt both the landowners and the public as a whole. So, I would just say that I'm in support of the changes that are looking at happening here. And there's a strong case to be made that minors and majors adds confusion to the issue. It's all development. If you really wanted to scratch the books and go back and make it cleaner, simply call it development. I'd like to be able to claim I'm smart enough to come up with that idea, but another county in Idaho has gone there. And they've evolved to that point. They've also evolved to the point where all private roads meet highway district standards. And eventually, as growth keeps going and more issues come back from developments that have issues with the infrastructure and the public is essentially left holding the bag, I could see Kootenai County eventually getting to that place. Obviously, it's Kootenai County, it's not the other county I was talking about, and everyone's different and unique, so it's not exactly apples and apples, but I don't know if I'm helping add clarity or hurting clarity here for everybody, but I guess at the end of the day, if development doesn't pay the cost, then I would ask you to think about who does.
Thank you, Ben. The person on PK's iPhone, did you wish to speak?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
My name is Preston Ramsey, and I'm at 415 South Alpine Drive, Liberty Lake, 99019. So I realize I reside across the border, but I'm involved with a couple of landowners there in Kootenai County, and actually grew up in Coeur d'Alene, old enough to go to remember Coeur d'Alene High School when it was on split shifts. So I understand the concerns, and I'm glad that I attended this because I got a chance to understand what was behind it as far as the highway district's concerns primarily. I do share some of Connie's concerns, and some, I think his name was Josh, and forgive me, I'm driving here, so I'm just kind of having to go by memory without any visual aids. But I guess my concern is the unintended consequences that may have not been considered here to somebody that maybe owns a large tract of land that is at the end of a private road and had plans in their future to minor subdivide that and doesn't have the ability to go in and acquire enough right-of-way, much less split the cost of building a highway district standards road to their property in order to do that. So that would be my only comment is just to make sure that the effect, the impact to solve the apparent problem doesn't have widespread negative impact to existing property owners. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Scott with NIBCA, did you wish to speak? Scott?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Now we can. Thank you. Go ahead.
Scott Hogue, I'm the president of NIBCA, and I reside at 10157 North Terran Street in Hayden. Don't have a whole lot to offer. We did talk about this issue at our board meeting tonight. The board has decided not to take a position on this. We've not had the opportunity to present this to our membership to get feedback back from them. So we are remaining neutral on this. I think from a personal perspective, as I sit and listen to the testimony tonight, I think the only comment I would have is just to be cautious of unintended consequences. I understand what David is presenting. It's unfortunate that people are abusing, in my view, abusing the system the way it is. suggesting that there would be unintended consequences, and maybe working with those that have spoke tonight in opposition, it might be good to come to some kind of resolution that works good for both sides. So that would be the comment that I would have, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Scott. Susan Weeks, did you wish to speak?
Yes, I would. Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Susan Weeks. My address is 1626 Lincoln Way, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I am an attorney and have practiced in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho for over 30 years. I also represent the highway districts, but I was not requested to speak on their behalf tonight, but I am going to speak from my personal observations regarding the proposed ordinance as it pertains to access. Just a little history. In 1995, the owners of parcels in Shamrock Ranch came forward to Kootenai County, and they were very displeased that the roads within that subdivision were not built to highway district standards, and they were having maintenance issues because the highway districts do not maintain roads that are not built to highway district standards. And that followed one of our growth spurt periods. At that time, Idaho code allowed anyone to split off 10 acres as a free split without being required to comply with any subdivision ordinance. In 2016, we had a similar change to the ordinance where we're now allowed to split 20 acres out, and it is not considered a subdivision. And the unintended consequence of that is it's allowed owners of parcels that are very large to do sequential splits of 20 acres, then do minor subdivisions, and basically do a phased subdivision that has the impact of a major subdivision on the roads, even though it's in the guise of a minor subdivision. And that is what Mr. Callahan is trying to assist the highway districts in addressing, and that was an unintended consequence. And I understand what people are saying about the generational splits. And the cool-off period that we've discussed is if we had a parent parcel of, say, 100 acres, and we said you could split off 20 acres, and then they could subdivide that into 4. That should help those small landowners and those generational individuals who want to split those parcels for their families. They also have another mechanism under your ordinances and statute where they can split those in their wills. So what is being proposed by the highway districts and is somewhat proposed in the pending subdivision ordinance amendment would not prohibit those small owners from that and would not put them on the onus of these large subdivision standards that they're concerned about. What it would do is it would help us with these major subdivisions that are masquerading as minors. And what happens when you have a major subdivision masquerading as a minor is you get no dedication of right-of-way to increase the width of the adjoining public road so it can be brought up to highway district standards. You get no financial contribution from the developer who is going to be dumping a significant amount of traffic out onto that road that is not built to standards and can't support that traffic. Because it's minor subdivisions, the highway districts are unable to comment and the county is unable to put a condition on the minor subdivision requiring them to address that deficiency in the road. Some of those deficiencies that we've seen now that we are living under some of these minor subdivisions that are masquerading as major subdivisions is we don't have turn bays, we don't have center lanes, we have too many stop-and-go driveways coming out onto higher speed roads, and that's all negatively impacting the traveling public, and it's impacting their safety. So our mechanism of addressing that is to try and limit the number of accesses, which is only minimally successful, or to decrease speeds, which eventually then, as Mr. Howard said, you've got a 15-mile-an-hour road where people are expecting a 45-mile-an-hour road. And now traffic starts backing up and is delayed. What was suggested by Mr. Shanley of putting down a cool-off period, even if you said 1 year, you can do a free split impact on those individuals who are doing the generational, but it would halt these major subdivisions that are trying to masquerade as minors, where they just come in and do a sequential 20 split, 20 split, 20 split, minor subdivision, minor subdivision, minor subdivision. And that should address the issue for everyone in a fair and balanced manner. Mr. Callahan, could we have Exhibit 1000 again, please?
Sure. Are you seeing it?
Yes, thank you. The other thing that is happening is, on the right of this is, I believe, Sunup Bay Road. A site disturbance permit was obtained for this parcel of property, and so the road is being built, the infrastructure is being put in ahead of the exemptions and the splits. What that does is they then can claim this is an existing road that doesn't need to be brought up to standards because it pre-exists the splits and the subdivisions. They have programmed that out onto a highway district road. You'll notice right at a curve with no consultation with the highway district. And as Mr. Howard noted, it is a significant amount of traffic onto a deficient road. And this is the impact of these minor subdivisions masquerading, major subdivisions masquerading as minors. This is one of those worst case scenarios, as was the one that Mr. Shanley showed you. We have a huge subdivision where they have not had to dedicate any right-of-way to bring any of the 4 highway district roads that front that subdivision up to standards, nor has it been planned how that traffic will be routed through the center part. So it makes for messy planning, and I think that what Mr. Callahan is proposing, if we put the 1-year limit on it, would prohibit what we're seeing, and it would certainly help planned growth and shouldn't impact the generational splits for the families who want to do small ones, or for the person who's bought 40 acres and is suddenly faced with medical expenses or unexpected expenses that requires them to subdivide and sell a part of their land. And so for that reason, Commissioners, I would urge you to adopt the ordinance amendments, but put that cool down period into the free split, that they can't do a second free split from the same parent parcel for a 1-year period. Thank you.
Thank you. The last speaker we had on Zoom was Alan. Did you wish to speak, Alan?
Yeah, I actually just had a question, and I apologize that I missed the first 10 minutes because I couldn't get my other speaker to work on my other computer. I had to run to this one. So on Exhibit 1000 there, and again, I apologize. Is this a major problem? I mean, I totally understand the whole purpose of this amendment now because of this. That makes sense. To me, that's unacceptable. To me, that is a major subdivision. I don't care how you slice it. I know they're going around, going through the loopholes to do it. But I guess my real question is this a common occurrence for them to do this? Do we need to make this change because of 1 or 2 bad apples, for lack of a better term? And that's really all my comment. I agree that something needs to be done, but for those that just want to, like say, generational split, or a couple of family members get together to buy some property to split it to share among themselves, I don't think it's quite fair to them. But again, just background, public safety for 35 years, fire department, see my share of accidents, and I understand where the highway department's coming from. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. That concludes the Zoom participants.
Okay, so everybody, okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, John, was that you, John? Okay.
Sorry to butt in again, but who was the last speaker?
Alan Dugan.
Thank you.
Sorry, John. Okay, we've heard all the comments in person and online and on the phone and on Zoom. I'd like to ask if someone will make a motion to close the public hearings for case number ORA 20-003 and case number ORA 20-005. Would someone like to make a motion?
This is Bing Van Dyke, I so move.
Okay, Commissioner Van Dyke made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Hanson made a second. Okay, I'll do a roll call. Commissioner David? Aye. Commissioner Stearns?
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rose?
Aye.
Commissioner Malloy?
Aye.
Commissioner Van Dyke?
Aye.
And I vote yes. So the public hearing for those two cases are closed, and we could now move into deliberations. What I'd like to do to start with is, can we go to the second actual issue on the agenda, which is ORA 20-0005, which is the amendment on the floodways, development of floodways. And I think does anybody have any comments on that or would like to move directly to a motion to approve as submitted?
Just move. Go ahead.
Okay, you want to make a motion?
Okay, I'll make a motion that we,
Motion to accept the
yeah,
amendments.
to accept the amendment, you've already
Yeah,
mentioned the
I'll read it for you.
Okay,
A motion to accept the amendments as submitted for case number ORA 20-0005 was made by.
I'll make that, I'll
Okay,
move to
Commissioner
move,
Rose
yeah.
has made a motion to accept. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, Commissioner David, actually, and then Commissioner David,
Second.
yes, no,
I'm sorry.
yeah. I just wanted,
Aye.
okay, Stearns,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson, Rose,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Van Dyke,
Aye.
and Levine. Aye. Okay, so that motion has passed, and that code amendment will be submitted to the county commissioners for their consideration.
Can I ask for a brief recess?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Can we have like let's do a 10-minute recess, come back around 20 of, so that we can get to the real meat of the issue? Okay. public hearing. What time, Sandy? 7:38. All right, I think the best thing to do as we go through this deliberations on this issue is to just open it up to each of the commissioners to ask questions and make comments. So I know that John has been waiting patiently to make comments. And so, John, if you would like to go first and tell us what your questions are or your comments are.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And patiently is kind of like a figure of speech. I heard so much tonight that makes me wonder, and it makes my blood pressure go up. So I need to look at my notes here and see. One of the first things that I heard was that nobody has the right to subdivide, and I can't imagine that concept. If we go back to look at private property rights, I think that we would find that private property is considered a bundle of rights. We've talked about this before. That bundle of rights is made up out of a right to control your property, a right to exclude people from your property, the right of enjoyment, and the right of disposition. So I would argue that the right of disposition would include the right to subdivide. So that notion in itself is objectionable to me. And then when we get to the purpose of this recommendation, this proposal, I'm not quite sure what it is. I was trying to get to that. It seems to me like the stated purpose, if you listen closely enough, is one of safety, of course, but that gets us to the intersections, the access, and those kinds of things. And yet we're attacking that in a manner that we've heard over and over and over again, which includes managing growth. And I don't think that managing growth is I don't think controlling growth, which I'm going to assume is synonymous with managing growth, I don't believe that to be the purpose of our commission anyway. I believe the purpose is to manage or to plan for growth so that we keep in mind the safety and health and general welfare of the people of Kootenai County. As growth comes, we try to make plans for it. And that's where the highway districts come in, because they need to make plans to accommodate growth when it happens. On the other hand, they should accommodate if there's any even meaning to accommodating negative growth. But there are some counties around that experience negative growth, and I guess I don't know what a highway district would do in a case like that other than just stop spending money somehow. But we heard it's unfortunate that there were two written comments that we commissioners get to see, but they didn't read them into the record. So to summarize, one of them submitted by Ms. Espy was long but meaningful, and she talks about how the costs are prohibitive to bring the roads up to highway standards. And each lot created, and maybe Director Callahan can address this, but each created lot apparently contributes $3,500 to the highway districts. So there is money generated there. And the other one, the other written comment was received today, I think, from Mr. and Mrs. Newton, Mr. and Mrs. Roy Newton. And he reiterated the fact that we've heard kind of peripherally that this comes down hard on the private property rights of mom and pop people who have acquired over time large parcels that they intend to either sell to help subside, help their own subsistence in retirement, or to help their kids by subdividing. And it's nice to know that we can help our kids when we die by allowing that split in our will. That probably is not what most people have in mind when they want to share their property with their kids and their grandkids. So I'm not even sure I'm done with my list. I need to take my nitro pills. But I would encourage, maybe it's too soon for that. I won't make a motion. I would encourage that we reject this proposal. When I look at I'll try to wrap it up here, but when I look at the spreadsheet that was sent out to us, it talks about the proposed road standards and the current standards, and all the current standards are adequate, I would say, and they were to rise to the standard of fire district standards. I guess is the way to say it, and those I believe, for the most part, are considered to be international fire district standards. I don't know, but at some point the people that are living on these or in these subdivisions have to take some responsibility too and realize that they're going to have to do with a road that only meets fire district standards and doesn't live up to the highway district. But I yield the floor.
Okay, thank you, John. Bing, you want to go next? Any comments, questions?
Let me go back to this idea of the 1-year moratorium, or what was the actual term that was used for that? Cool off or
Cooling period.
I don't think 1 year is sufficient. I think it would be better to be longer than that. I think that the whole intent, as I can understand on this, is to prevent people with large properties subventing the whole idea of a major subdivision to save money. And I think what we want to do is to prevent that without putting an undue burden on the very small, when I say small, 20 or 30 acre property owner who would intend to subdivide, who has no ability to essentially really do a major subdivision. And somehow we have to come up with language that prevents the one and allows the other.
Well, going back to what Bing had to say about that, we really do have a dichotomy here. Is people trying to circumvent the fact that you're trying to create a major subdivision, they need to create a major subdivision. How you define that, I don't know. Because what happened with the case that Mr. Shanley presented was those were separate property owners that were split off in different names, I should say. So it's really hard for somebody to identify anybody who's trying to circumvent a major subdivision. The problem with it is that the costs need to be incurred for future use for the residents, because they ultimately end up, I've seen it happen, where they have to do the road improvements, and it comes to their cost. So if somebody's going to do a major subdivision, they need to do a major subdivision. How we define that, I don't know. I think that Mrs. Weeks probably presented the best case. What we do in this process is punish those that want to do splits for their family or for their inheritance. And I think that the 1-year cooling off period is appropriate, because anybody who's going to do a major subdivision is not going to wait a year for that to occur. So I think that verbiage needs to change as far as the cooling off period from 5 to 1.
I've lived with this issue for weeks, trying to understand it. And it's clear to me an abuse is taking place, which costs the community money and leads to bad land use planning and all of its consequences. And that is certain developers skirting a now legal process and creating major subdivisions without putting the proper investment in and disguising them as minor subdivisions. I also hear people who have large tracts of land who want to do simple split for families or whatever inheritance they might want. And so I want to make a motion, but I want to hear, John has a motion that has to be voted on, by the way, or seconded and then voted on possibly. And then following everybody, I'd like to make a motion to try to send this in a direction toward resolution. Thank you.
Okay. Deborah?
What we're considering tonight is basically going back to what the ordinance was prior to 2016, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, I mean,
That's the intent, yeah.
yeah. So, prior to 2016, the big concern is having families to be able to subdivide their parcels and not have any high cost and issues with putting in roads. How was it handled? How was it handled back then if a family wanted to subdivide their 20-acre parcel? I mean, was it a problem for them
There
then?
are two things that I can say that were different. Pat knows the history better than I do. The two things I know of is we had a county road standard, and it was very similar to the highway district standard, but a lesser standard. And then and they had to comply with that. And again, back in the day, you had to be adjacent to a highway district road to start. So that was the starting point from the inception of the county subdivision regulations until 2016.
So it didn't prevent families from being able to then, it wasn't an issue. I mean,
Presumably it did, but we didn't hear about it. I was only here for a few years until 2016, 3 years, but I can't recall that I ever heard anyone complain about our then process.
okay. So,
Commissioner Rose, just wanted to add to that. I think, going to kind of the pre-David history, I remember at least a few instances where people did complain about that, but it didn't seem particularly widespread. And one thing you could do under the old ordinance, you could do a minor subdivision if you upgraded the private road to highway district standards all the way to the nearest public road, which of course was cost prohibitive for a lot of people.
mm-hmm. And that's the complaint now, right? Mm-hmm. So then, and you don't have to, I don't think you don't have to pull it up again, your exhibit 1000, but that example of that subdivision, if we implement the cooling off period, I mean, in 10 or 12 years, if we, every year they have to wait to do another one, 10 or 12 years, we're gonna have that same situation. So I don't know if I'm a fan of I don't know if that's good enough. I don't know if I'm a fan of the cooling off period.
Okay.
Okay.
Madeline?
Well, I'm like Deborah, I would think that a 1 year was not quite enough of a cooling off period. Now Barry, who knows more about it, says that would stop a major subdivision, but I'm skeptical of that. I do sympathize with the people who want to carve off a piece for their next generation. I was just talking to Mr. Callahan about that and saying there's certainly, if the road that goes to them does not serve more than 4 people in the end, 4 divisions in the end, they could still do that. Again, configuration would be potentially a problem on their land, but it's still possible. I think we just have to be careful that we're not making major, even larger, consecutive, even different ownerships, consecutive divisions that make major developments, even if they are completely separate and are not planned that way. Those are my thoughts.
Okay.
Do you want to ask Pat
Yeah.
a quick question before we move on?
Ed, Deborah?
I've looked up the definition of bundle of rights many years ago online, and I've seen a number of different definitions, and I know the state of Idaho has a definition of bundle of rights, and there's three conditions in that. Do you know what they are offhand?
Bundle of rights.
I thought I've seen it somewhere.
Well, it's not in statute. It's really a construct of common law, going back to the common law of England, which we adopted when, even after we became independent, that a property, private property, it's like a bundle of sticks. You have, the ability to occupy it, the ability to sell it, the ability to purchase it, the ability to exclude others from it, the ability to use it as you see fit within the bounds of the law, etc. But and I was actually doing some research on the fly on Westlaw at the beginning of this hearing, just to confirm that the particular ability to subdivide property is not considered a fundamental right under the U.S. Constitution. It can be allowed or restricted or prohibited to the extent that the jurisdiction desires, as long as there's a rational basis for it. That's the lowest level of scrutiny that courts give a law. And so in our case, just let the commissioners know, there is no subdivision allowed in the agricultural zone. You can only divide land if it is specifically exempted from the provisions of the subdivision regulations. And of course, you cannot subdivide, in other zones, you cannot subdivide property to where the lots would be smaller than the minimum lot size, for example, in that zone. And so there are restrictions we put on subdivisions in our current land use regulations that do often curtail the right, the ability of people to subdivide. Now, given that, it has become an expectation over the last 4 years that people will be able to subdivide their property, whether they live on a public road or not. And certainly that concern has been brought up both in public testimony and in deliberations so far. And so that's certainly a consideration from a policy perspective that the board will need to consider. But restricting subdivision of property is allowed as long as, other than the people that have the vested rights under the then current land use regulations at the time that they submitted their application. That's the only that's the only restriction on the ability to loosen or tighten those regulations.
Thank you, Pat.
All right. As I normally do, I don't actually provide my view until later on when I vote on this. So I think John, when he was talking, indicated that he wanted to make a motion. So I think the first appropriate thing to do is to hear what John's motion is, see if we have a second, and then go through the roll call on the vote. And then, depending on what that is and what the results are, then we can go to the next, or not go to the next phase and that kind of thing. So I would ask John, you want to make a motion, John?
Well, I don't know. I guess I probably do, but can I make another couple of comments before that, or no?
Sure.
Or should I save that for discussion? But
No.
No what? No, I can't, or no, it's okay if I do?
No, you can go. No, please talk, John. It was no, you didn't have to wait.
Okay, I'm going to go then. I've heard the comment about creeping incrementalism, and I understand that because that's exactly what's happening to property rights with the advent of planning and zoning. or land use planning, I should say, land use regulations. And, you know, we've heard about 2016 being some sort of threshold, but none of this even applied till David Callahan can tell us, I'm going to say 1972 or something. So it's all relatively new, at least in the eyes of an old guy. So, yeah, I think that the nature of planning, the nature of land use is to try to make one size fit all. And so here we are addressing some issue that's generated by an effort to circumvent a law or a code. And which reminds me too, if there's a lot of effort to circumvent a code or a law, then there must be something not right about that law or that code. And so here we are trying to make one size fit all, and grandma and grandpa, it was a term I think used by Ms. Espy in her written comments, get penalized for it. Having said that, I guess my motion would be pretty simple, and Mr. Chairman, if you can guide me in it, what I want to say is that I make a move that we decline to take action on this proposed road, or whatever, what do we...
Okay. Well, John, yeah, let me just, I think what you're saying is you'd like to make a motion to reject the amendments as submitted for ORA 20-003 code.
And
So-
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I, you know, with that being said, I need to jump in here. I would suggest that be amended to rejection of the proposed sections 86301 and 86707, because there are other changes in this
Oh, I see.
proposal
Great
that
point.
are uncontroversial, and I think at the very least those should be moved forward.
Yeah, no, thank you, Pat. What are the numbers again, Pat?
8.6.301
Right,
and 8.6.707.
707. Okay, so I'll change that. It's motion to deny or reject sections 8.6.301 and 8.6.707 of the code, ORA 20-0003. Okay, so John, you made a motion to do that. Do I have a second? John made that motion. Do I have a second to,
What do those say, Pat?
well, it's going back, it's taking out the high, it is all about, it's going back to where we are today.
Okay, I'll just give a brief explanation of each. The changes to 86301 would restrict the ability to apply for a minor subdivision. It changes the definition of what a minor subdivision is and when it can be applied for versus having to apply for a major subdivision. 86707 contains the specific regulations regarding public and private roads within, adjacent to, or connecting a subdivision.
Okay, thanks.
So it's back to where we are today, right, Pat?
Right.
Yeah, it erases that. But what Pat corrected me on, which I forgot about, is there's other things in here like condominium, like the housekeeping things that we don't want to reject at, I don't think.
The building permit.
Yeah, the building permit one. All right. So we have a motion made by Commissioner Malloy. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Van Dyke. Okay. Discussion. Wes?
I think we have to not reject this, but have to come up with a reasonable approach which solves both problems.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, John?
Yeah, I think I would agree with what I think Wes said. If we want to talk about a cooling off period, then let's pass this motion and consider it a cooling off period to find out how we can address it. This is not putting the hammer down on grandma and grandpa.
Any other discussion?
We need to go through with the motion and then try try to frame it in a little bit more coherent motion going forward. This motion as stated has an absolute quality to it.
Yeah, the question I've got is, can we rephrase the whole, following on Wes's idea, can we rephrase the whole thing, or do we have to deny this and then produce another ordinance that's rephrased?
We could go and put whatever language we would like in this and approve it, or approve it with change of language that is in the proposal. And we've done that in the past. So if we wanted to put in a cooling off period, if we wanted to carve out an exception for generational type of things, we could. It would be difficult. I wonder how we would get there at this moment. I mean, what the other options we have available to us is to what I'm looking for, like stopping the public hearing. I'm sorry, Wes? Continue the public hearing until next week, and at that time, spend a couple hours to go through that, but I don't know how, without getting work from David and others, I don't know how we would do that, but we have that option. We could do that. So that's, do you want to speak, David, or?
Commissioners,
Yeah.
if any one commissioner wants to volunteer ideas, you can certainly take that as a, once this motion has run its course, you could have anyone offer up their suggestions for a different approach.
Right.
Right.
I mean, there's many different options. You
Right.
could reject it as submitted,
Or
or
modify,
you
or
could modify it, or you could accept it, or you can, so it really, the question would be is, are we prepared tonight to be able to actually figure out, I heard a lot about unintended consequences, and I think that's exactly right. In 2016, when the code was changed, there's unintended consequences, and we're living with some of those right now. If we go and reject this or try to amend it on the fly, we need to have the time to go and look at the unintended consequences. You really would like to go back and say, okay, here are the problems. I forgot who mentioned that. But here's the problems we're trying to solve for. I heard about access management issues, safety issues. We're trying to solve for that. Okay, we're not trying to stop. I never thought of this as a growth discussion. I know people have been talking about managing growth, or I think John says plan for growth versus planned growth. I never thought of this as a growth. I thought this was a problem we had with safety and access. It's an infrastructure. And one of the things that we did in our comprehensive plan is spend a lot of time talking about the need to have adequate infrastructure for development. And we also talked about the people that were doing the development should pay their fair share of that infrastructure costs. So what we could do is, living true to the comprehensive plan, which is what we're supposed to do, living to the fact that we want to be safe, safety and health and general welfare is real important. We can go back and work with community development, work with the people we heard tonight, and try to figure out how do you solve as many problems you can without creating new ones. I mean, that's really what the issue is. I don't think anyone intended to go and say we want to stop people from leaving their land to their kids or family or whatever else. On the other hand, we cannot, at least my view, we cannot allow access problems that are creating safety issues. So the question is, I don't know what the motion would look like to say we want to go and not approve as it is tonight, but we want to have the opportunity to go in there and modify it. But I don't think we could do that tonight. That's my opinion on that.
No, that would require another public hearing
Yeah.
I think unless you were able to do it on the fly in this room tonight,
Yeah,
but
well-
I don't think we're gonna be able to do that. Perhaps, I think the motion on the table could probably stand as made with the understanding that, all the commission would work with all the different stakeholders to try to improve this proposed language and, to address the concerns that have been expressed, at a later date, or
Right.
more than one later
Yeah.
date, probably.
But if we made the motion as we indicated, which is what we're rejecting 8.6301 and 8.6707,
Yeah.
does that mean that the other parts of is approved? We're approved?
I think I think you would want to probably amend the motion to specifically add that.
And then we would approve?
I think that was the understanding when I brought that
Yeah.
up, but, perhaps the motion can be amended to expressly reflect that.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is the motion would be to reject. Yeah, yes, Wes?
I'm wondering if John would allow me to make a friendly amendment to his motion so that we have a little bit more clarity.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to actually, so, but since you were my chief speechwriter, I'll let you go and do that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I don't know that I want to blindly allow that. I'm flying blind. I don't see what those are. I think Pat Hayden has pretty well captured my intent. I think it sounds like you understand it, and if I understand you, then I understand it. So I would like to hear what Wes has to say, but I'm reluctant, but I'd like to hear what Wes has to say.
But, John, I'll make sure, I want to clarify one thing before Wes speaks, to make sure I understood part of it, is that what we're saying is the code change to bring us back to 2016 road standards, or prior to 2016 road standards, are being rejected. That's what 8.6.301 and 8.6.707 are, okay? We also want to approve the other two minor things that are there, which is the name and change to condominiums and the building permit, when building permits are allowed. And then what I think Wes was getting to, we want to put in the motion that we want to go back and work on coming up with a solution that addresses some of the concerns that we heard, but also both on the access side as well as the generational split side. Whether that's a cooling off period or what it was, that's what I think I'm hearing. So Wes, is that what you were thinking?
Yeah. I can read it, if John is receptive.
Sure, well, I'm receptive to hearing it, and I think it's what I'm saying. It sounds like a procedural effort, or a procedural issue to me, but it's accomplishing the same thing I meant to accomplish. But go ahead, please.
Oh, John, Pat Braden, I was just going to agree with you on that.
Okay.
That was my intent as well. So.
Yeah, okay, I think we all have the intent, we need the words now, and that is where Wes comes in.
I move to table the consideration of case number ORA 20-0003 until an addition is made to sections 8.6.301 and 8.6.707 that adds a 2-year or longer cooling off period or some other means, which clearly prevents development of a major subdivision using the minor subdivision process and allows individual property owners to make simple splits with no intention of development.
Wes, let me ask you a question, because that's very specific. 2 years, not 18 months, not 24 months.
Would be
Wouldn't it?
24 months.
Oh, well, yeah, it is 24 months, yeah. 36 months or whatever. Wouldn't it be just simpler to say that we want to go and reject 8.6.301 and 8.6.707 and address the concerns address the concerns heard during the public hearing to try to come up with a solution that has less unintended consequences or something like that. So we don't know what it is. I mean, I don't know if 2 years is the right. I don't know if a cooling off period is right. I don't know on that. So isn't it more generic?
So, Mr. Chair,
Yeah, John.
Just an idea.
Yeah, John.
sorry, Wes, for interrupting, yeah, I think that when I just had a procedural issue, and I couldn't, unfortunately, I couldn't understand what Pat Braden's comments were, but is this to continue discussion? Is that why we're asking to amend the motion, or is it, if we don't amend the motion, I think you said something about requiring another public hearing, or?
Well, yeah, we're still going to probably, what we wanted to add, John, to is that we don't want to, we're rejecting what's in there today. We don't want to reject totally the concept of trying to deal with the issues that we heard. So the access issues, for example, and the generational splits issue. Does that make a little more sense?
Basically, yeah.
I mean, I think that was already
Implied.
well, I think expressed where necessarily implied in Commissioner Malloy's motion.
Okay.
The issue I have with Commissioner Hanson's proposed amendment is that it would basically hold the uncontroversial changes hostage to this effort when those should go forward to the county commissioners.
So again, what I think the motion is to reject 8.6.301. You're going to get tired of talking. 8.6.707 of ORA 20-0003, and continue discussion on those sections for a later date. Is that okay, Pat?
I think that's much clearer.
Cleaner, yeah. Okay.
Let me have Pat simplify the motion, so I should be listening well. Motion to reject case number a motion to approve case number ORA 20-0003 with the exception of sections 8.6.301 and 8.6.707,
that works.
which are to be investigated to come up with ways of solving the problem of major subdivisions brought in as minor subdivisions, and to examine ways of creating, I don't have a better word, individual.
Well, but again, Wes, why can't you use all that and just say, and then explore options to address the issues we've heard tonight?
All right, a new motion. I move to approve case number ORA 20-0003, and with the exception of sections 8.6.301 and 8.6.707, and to investigate ways to address the concerns heard at this hearing.
Is that a friendly amendment?
If the original mover and second agree, then it would be a friendly amendment. Otherwise, we would vote on the amendment
Yeah.
and then vote on either depending on the success of that motion, vote on the motion as amended or vote on the original motion.
What's the easiest thing to do?
Well, hopefully
John and Bing agree to the revision?
that
to
would
the-
be the best case
Right.
scenario, yes.
John and Bing, do you agree to the motion, revised motion that Wes just read? John?
So here we go with Robert's Rules of Order, I guess. I'm reluctant to amend it. I guess my motion, somebody tell me what my motion is. I want to stick with it. I would entertain the amendment to investigate further the concerns brought up at the public hearing of November 12th, but
That was the last part of Commissioner Hanson's motion. The only thing he did differently is he moved to approve the other provisions, the other language that's proposed for amendment, and not recommend approval of 86301 or 86707.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
My
Those last two items that you mentioned, they're the ones that have to do with the minor subdivision.
Yes.
Correct.
My understanding, and maybe you can help me with this, Pat, of Robert's Rules of Order, is a friendly motion doesn't require the original motion maker to approve a friendly motion. Is a friendly motion is just voted on, and then the original
Well, that's if it's not a friendly amendment.
amendment, I'm sorry,
Yeah. If Commissioner Malloy does not agree, then we would need to vote on Commissioner Hanson's amendment, and then depending on how that vote goes, we would vote on the motion as amended or vote on the original motion.
So John isn't agreeing to Wes's?
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah,
So we need to vote on?
So we're going to vote on John's amendment, which is basically.
No,
Wes's
Wes's
first.
first. Yes.
Yeah, because there's been amendment. Oh, we need to get a second on Commissioner
Yeah,
Hanson's motion.
I know. See,
I think you have to vote on John's motion before we can address Wes's motion.
No.
No, the other way. The other way
Yeah,
around.
if somebody proposes an amendment, that goes first.
okay, so who's gonna second Wes's motion?
Amendment.
Yes.
Amendment.
tell me again what it is.
Oh,
Wes, you want to read it again?
I'll try, and you can revise. Here we go. It's to move to approve case number ORA 20-003, with the exception of sections 8.6.301 and 8.6.707, and to investigate further how to, what we heard in terms of public testimony regarding major subdivisions coming underneath, in the disguise as minor subdivisions, and also the public's concern about individuals being able to make simple divisions of property that they don't intend to develop.
And someone has to second that motion. Does anybody second it?
I'll second it.
Okay. So,
So Commissioner Levine, can I complicate one more issue here?
yeah,
So, Mr. Callahan, since this has come to light that this was going to change, how many applications have you had for minor subdivisions that your planning department had to deal with recently? In other words, are people taking advantage of this as an opportunity to apply for minor subdivisions
You have an idea?
knowing that they're going to skirt the.
Understood. I'm going to rely on one of the planners that actually processes these things to give us an answer. Zachary, go ahead.
Thank you. Planner Zach Trevino for the record. As far as applications that have actually been submitted, we have had a significant number in recent weeks. A large portion of that is the group that Director Callahan discussed today, and used as the example for tonight's discussion. As far as the other ones that have been submitted, I don't know, and I don't know if anybody in our department knows whether they would have been submitted anyway, or whether they are submitted now specifically with anticipation of this amendment. But I can tell you that many people that are talking to us about submitting an application, such as during the pre-application meetings that they are required to participate in, they are interested in the deadlines and the potential for this to be approved, and they have expressed that they will try to get the subdivision application prepared as quickly as possible in order to have it vested under current code. So there is interest and discussion about an influx of applications that could certainly happen if this were to be approved, but there's no way to know for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. The reason I'm asking is that was my concern, is that people are taking advantage of the delay, and if we spend more time, which we should, deliberating the nuances of this motion, what can we do about those additional applications coming in, and how long is this going to take for us to get through this process?
Mr. Chair, that raises a question I have, actually. We've already scheduled a public hearing for the board to consider this, and my understanding is it would go forward with whatever you've said tonight, and then they would decide whether or not they're going to accept your recommendation or not.
Right.
It's entirely possible they could approve what is before you.
So is the cleanest thing to do to honor the original motion and see if it passes of John's motion, which is basically, either it'll be rejected, those sections, and we'll modify it so that it's only those sections, and not even discuss the other part of it. And then if the county commissioners on their public hearing decides to approve it, which they can do, even with our...
Or they could tell us to go back to drawing board.
And if they tell us to go back to the drawing board, then we would, at that time, go back to the drawing board. But spending time, I'm not sure when their public hearing is.
10.
Okay, spending the next 3 or 4 weeks trying to come up with ideas, I don't know if that would be valuable time spent or not, if they're going to either approve it or reject it. So, I mean, that's another option, just go back and... So the question, we have let's just go through these motions and get some votes. David, you have anything, something else?
One other thing I like Pat's opinion on, I was just thinking when the notion of rules of order came up, in your bylaws, we don't actually say that Robert's Rules of Order even...
It's not in there.
Yeah, we don't have a
Yeah.
procedure laid out.
Oh.
And so with the lack of a procedure, I defer to Pat on how you deal with motions and seconds.
Well, yeah, I mean, Robert's Rules of Order does not strictly apply to this proceeding or any proceeding of the Planning Commission. That being said, I think, just in the interest of order, we should consider the amendment unless Commissioner Hanson and Commissioner David are willing to withdraw it, and then determine which motion to consider for final approval.
So we're voting on which motion to consider?
No.
Okay. So let me ask you a
We're
question.
voting-
If
we
we
would
do
vote-
if we do Wes's first,
Yes.
and it passes 4-3, 5-2, or whatever, or if it passes, do we go to John's motion then?
If it no, then
No.
you would
Right.
you would vote on the motion as amended. So
You're gonna. I'm totally
I
confused.
know it's.
but
I apologize for that, but we can dispense with the second one and just deem a successful vote on the amendment to be a vote on the motion as amended. I think that would make that a little simpler, at least.
that means we're motioning on Wes's with David's second.
With Madeline being second.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, I got it now.
So I think with that, we should probably just call the roll on that.
We would accept everything but the road stuff. And what we're committing to is to go back to the drawing board on the road stuff. But even if we went back to the drawing board, it may or may not be
Well,
used.
it could be rendered moot, but it might not. So
Right, it depends.
I think we can, I think the commission can vote on that motion as it stands.
Okay.
That's where you land, that's fine.
That amendment
okay.
as it stands, sorry.
All right, so,
Question.
yeah.
If this motion passes, then we're supposed to go back to the drawing board. And so it sounds to me like what people are looking at wanting to do is change the ordinance so that developers' applications are treated different than family applications that want to subdivide their property for
Well,
family members?
That's a potential option, but I
It is,
think.
and that's
I think,
legal?
We're not down that path.
yeah,
We're not down that path. What
potentially.
what we're trying to do, if we accept Wes's motion, is to go back and look at the comments we heard tonight and ones that were written to us. And it really comes down to a couple of big issues. One is an access issue that we're having. It's not a growth issue. It's not how bad David's workload is. It's none of that. It's about access to roads and public safety versus how this change that we would have approved tonight would have impacted people that it was not really causing the problem, the unintended consequences of the generational people. So what we'd be doing is going back and saying, is there a better solution than this that takes care, I think, again, it was Connie who mentioned about what is the problem we're trying to solve for? And then once you understand the problem you're trying to solve for, then you come up with a solution, and then you see how does that impact people, and are there unintended consequences that you may need to address? So that's the way I'm taking this, and then again, the county commissioners can approve this as submitted, or they may think after, maybe they would like additional information on the same questions that we're asking. I don't know. That's not our issue to address. Our issue to address is I'm hearing that we'd like to go back and try to make this less onerous on a population of people within the county. That's pretty much what it is. So Wes is, yeah, John?
No, I'll be brief. I think Commissioner Hanson and I are kind of on the same track. I'm attacking it from a standpoint of rejecting these two sections, I guess I'll call them, and retaining the rest, and then with the idea that we'll discuss it further.
Correct.
And Commissioner Hanson is saying that, well, no, let's approve those that we like, and reject the ones, and then talk about this and this and this and this and this and this. So the only difference I see is one of perspective. One is rejecting while we let the other ride. The other one is approving while we reject the others. My motion says, let's talk about it a little bit more. His motion says, let's talk about it from the standpoint of these people that are trying to scam the system and
Yeah, right.
And a lot more specific than mine.
Right. You're
I was going to say, to be honest, to me, those are distinctions without a difference. I agree with Commissioner Malloy's perspective about perspective, but I think in substance, I think they're essentially the same motion.
The simpler thing isn't a simpler thing just to say, we're rejecting these two things, we're accepting these things, and we're going to talk about it, to try to resolve issues.
I think that's what everybody's trying to dance around
and I think with
saying.
Wes it gets into specific problems,
Right.
and that kind of either limits us or whatever else. The easiest thing is just to say, we we motion to, and I think he said accept ORA 2020-003 with the exception of 8.6.301, 8.6.707, and I would just add, and address the issues heard at the public hearing, comments we heard during the public hearing on November 12th.
And honestly, I think that's what everybody's saying.
Yeah, so I mean, that's simple. You're not talking about subdivisions, minor, major, and all that. But unless you withdraw your motion, if you withdraw your second, we could go and take John's motion and add that last piece I just said, which is address the issue, and then we'll be.
Yeah, and actually, John said that in his motion, so.
Yeah, okay, so,
Okay, so I withdraw my second.
okay. So Wes, you still have a motion. Does anybody second Wes's motion? If not, we'll go back to John's motion. Okay, so, all right, so John,
So that motion dies for lack of second.
yeah, right,
Okay.
that motion. And Sandy, I hope you're keeping track of this. Because I've lost track of it, okay?
Okay, so,
okay.
yeah, well, now we're considering the original
The
motion.
original motion made by Commissioner Malloy, seconded by Commissioner Van Dyke, which is, and I'm going to paraphrase again, John, is motion to accept amendments in ORA 20-003 with the exception of 8.6.301 and 8.6.707, and address and attempt to address the concerns heard at the public hearing on November 12th, 2020, period. So, any other discussion before we vote?
Yeah. Does John agree to, I think he said to accept case number ORA 20-3330 or 0003. Before he wanted to reject it,
Right.
would have put all the other things suggested.
No, he just said reject the two
Right.
controversial sections and recommend approval of the rest.
Right. You're all, in only thing that John added about your motion is he thought it may have been too specific in some of the solutions that we're trying to solve. The way I changed it, it's just we're going to go back and look at it. We don't know what we're going to do. We may not,
And that's not really a change from Commissioner Malloy's motion anyway.
yeah. All right, anything else?
Let me ask Pat a question.
Yes.
And that is, can we, consider this and make a decision on this motion? Rather than us investigating the possible answers to the problems that have been occurring because of the current regs, you have that work done and it comes before the county commissioners, or is it best to just stay within our own circle?
I would just leave Commissioner Malloy's motion as it stands currently, because what happens, it provides that what happens afterward is open-ended in terms of addressing the issues raised.
It gives us the most flexibility to be able to do what we find out, but you got to do research and find out what are we trying to solve for, type of thing. Okay, anything else before we vote?
Read the motion again since we've gone through such turbulence.
It's, okay, motion to accept the amendments for ORA 20-0003 with the exception of sections 8.6.301 and 8.6.707 and continue to and to address the issues heard at the public hearing on November 12th, 2020. And that was made by Commissioner Malloy, seconded by Commissioner Van Dyke. So I'm going to go around and do a roll call. Commissioner David,
Aye.
Commissioner Stearns,
Can you come back to me?
sure. Commissioner Hanson, Commissioner Rose,
No, but if this passes, I would like to ask Connie Kruger if she could please send David Callahan a copy of the suggestions that she read to us, so he could send it to us and we could consider those. Please, Connie?
Okay, so that was a no, Deborah?
Yes, no.
Okay. Commissioner Malloy?
Aye.
Commissioner Van Dyke? Aye. Wes, did you say aye?
Not yet.
No, you haven't called his.
You said, okay, and then Barry, Commissioner Stearns? Aye. And for the heck of it, I'll go aye too, so, the motion passes, by a 6-1 vote. All right, anybody have any other questions? No, Sandy, what time? 8:39. I'd like to adjourn the public hearing at 8:39 PM. Thanks, everybody.